The sky was fire, not from the sun, but from the wreckage tumbling in flames toward the ground. Burning ships, shattered drones, fragments of a fleet that once blotted out the stars. Among them, a streak of black metal hissed through the upper atmosphere, trailing smoke. It screamed across the dawn, spiraling, then vanished behind a distant mountain range. On the ridge below, Elias Ward squinted against the glare. His beard was caked with soot, eyes sunken from exhaustion but still sharp. He wore no insignia, just a shredded combat jacket and an old American flag patch stitched to his shoulder. The kind of man you could drop into hell and expect him to report back. He lowered the binoculars. That wasn't ours. No, replied Anika Rowe, her voice low, clipped. That was one of theirs. She stood beside him, rifle slung over her back, hair tied in a rough braid. Sharp eyes, quick hands. Ex-intelligence turned battlefield scavenger, and now something else, survivalist, fighter, partner. Elias nodded once. Looks like it made planet fall. Intact. Intact enough to still be dangerous. Behind them, the remnants of the outpost stirred. There were fewer than 30 soldiers left, some limping, some wrapped in bandages, all hardened by fire. The outpost had once been a staging ground. Now it was a scar in the landscape. The Veroan invasion had come without warning. No demands, no declarations, just fire from the sky. Their ships descended like blades, cutting apart satellites and slamming into cities. Elias had seen it firsthand when Chicago turned to glass. He hadn't expected to survive, but the Earth had proven more stubborn than the aliens anticipated. Commander Reyes wanted a scout team sent after the wreck. Anika said, scanning the horizon. He'll want eyes and boots both. Could be intel. Could be tech. Could be bait. Anika looked at him, unreadable. He's sending us, isn't he? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. Within the hour, they were on the move, just the two of them. Silent through the snow-crusted forest, rifles tight to their chests, footsteps light. The further they traveled from the outpost, the quieter the world became. Not peace, just the absence of birdsong and engine hum. Like the land itself was holding its breath. They reached the impact site by dusk. The ground was scorched for 200 meters in every direction, trees reduced to charcoal. Steam hissed from where the wreck had split the earth, half buried in rock. It wasn't a Veroan fighter. Elias had seen plenty of those, both intact and shattered. This was bigger. A transport pod, or maybe something worse. Sleek angles, obsidian plating, alien runes etched into the hull. Looks like it hit hard, Anika muttered, circling the edge. But it didn't break open. Doors are shut, sealed from the inside. Elias crouched, ran his hand along the surface. Warm. Something still alive in there. Anika tapped her earpiece. Row to outpost. We found the wreck. Sending visuals now. Static. She frowned, adjusted the dial. Outpost. Do you read? Nothing. They're jamming us, Elias said grimly. Or they've already hit the ridge. Anika scanned the treetops. Either way, we're alone. Elias rose. Then we do what we came to do. They searched the perimeter first, wary of sentries or traps. Found nothing. Just old blood trails, leading away from the wreck and into the dark. Not human. The fluid was thick, green-black, crusted over. Something survived the crash, Anika whispered. Or several somethings. They followed the trail into the woods. Visibility dropped fast. The trees clustered tight here, like a cage. The temperature plummeted. Their breath came out in clouds. Movement, Elias said suddenly. They dropped, waited, listened. Branches creaked. Something heavy moved ahead, slow but deliberate. Not the loping stride of an animal. More like armor dragging across bark. A figure stepped into view, towering, limping. Its body was humanoid, but twisted, Elongated limbs, clawed feet, one arm fused with a weapon. No eyes, only a ridged mask like a skull. It breathed through vents that hissed steam. Anika aimed. Warlord cast. Not just any warlord, Elias whispered. This one's a hunter. The creature stopped, sniffed the air, then turned sharply in their direction. It didn't hesitate. It charged. Anika fired. The round struck its shoulder, but it barely flinched. Elias pulled a thermal grenade from his vest, activated it, and hurled it. It detonated midair. Heat bloomed. The hunter reeled back, howling, armor smoking. "Moo!" Elias shouted. They ran, zigzagging between trees, diving over roots and fallen logs. Behind them, the creature recovered fast. It gave chase, smashing through brush, slashing trees aside like matchsticks. They broke into a clearing. Elias spun, rifle up, and fired a burst. Rounds punched into the hunter's chest, staggering it, but not stopping it. Anika grabbed his arm. "We can't kill it. Not like this. Then we trap it." They drew it toward the ravine, a gash in the land where frozen water thundered into darkness. The hunter was faster now, emboldened, closing the gap. Elias veered left. Anika veered right. The creature lunged between them, momentarily confused. Elias stopped at the edge of the ravine, turned, and faced it. "Come on," he muttered. "Just a little closer." The hunter snarled. It charged. At the last second, Elias dropped flat. The hunter didn't stop. Momentum carried it forward, over the edge. It vanished into the black. Anika slid beside him, panting. That was close. Too close. Elias sat up. "We need to get back. Warn them. That thing wasn't alone." Before she could answer, the ground shook. Not from impact, but footsteps. Heavy. Measured. 3 more figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. Taller, bulkier, their silhouettes outlined by the moonlight. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence was a message. Anika swore. "We've stirred the hive." Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. "Good." She glanced at him. "Good. They were hunting us before. Now they're coming. That means they're afraid." A pause. Then she nodded. "Let's give them a reason." They turned back into the woods, vanishing into shadow, already planning. The hunt had begun, but not the way the Veruan expected. This time, the prey was human, and humans hunted back. A silence settled over the battlefield that felt unnatural. Smoke twisted between the pine trees like serpents, coiling around shattered pieces of alien war machines. Their once perfect symmetry was marred. Blackened husks of the Veruan legion's pride now lay broken in snow, strewn across frozen terrain by weapons they had mocked. Captain Elias Grant sat motionless inside Mahler, listening to the faint ticking of the engine cooling. Every breath he took was slow, deliberate. His fingers rested on the edge of the command console, as if touching the machine itself offered clarity. He wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Across the comms, faint chatter rippled, a mix of awe, confusion, and brutal efficiency. Human forces regrouped, counted their ammo, checked for wounded. No triumph in their tone, just acknowledgement. One battle survived. Nothing more. Recon teams report scattered movement along the northwest ridge, Reyes muttered, scanning his panel. No formation, just motion. They're probing, Elias replied, trying to figure out what just happened. Reyes looked up. They should have figured out already. We killed them. That's what happened. Elias didn't answer. Something about the sudden quiet unsettled him more than the fighting had. The Veruan weren't used to being pushed back. That meant they wouldn't accept it. They'd return, angrier, smarter, and dangerous in ways they hadn't yet revealed. From behind the tank, Sergeant Anika Havel approached, her breath fogging in the cold. She was wrapped in snow-dusted gear, a hardened scout whose eyes never stopped moving. She tapped twice on the Abrams side armor, and Elias cracked the hatch to meet her. "We've got movement on the southern approach," she said without preamble. "Not combat units. Probes. Thin ones. Too fast for our scopes to track properly." Elias frowned. "They're scanning us?" "More than that. I think they're trying to map the terrain. Possibly our supply routes." He climbed fully out of the hatch, boots crunching softly as he landed beside her. "Then they're preparing for a counterstrike." "Exactly," Anika said, voice low. "And we're still down to 10 tanks and maybe 50 infantry. We break here, and the rest of the continent falls." He nodded, jaw set. "We need to hold the valley." Anika's brow lifted slightly. "With 10 tanks?" "No," Elias replied. "With 10 Abrams." She didn't smile, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, respect. She knew the weight of that statement. Back at the ridge, High Marshal Trexer's command canopy was cloaked in thick fog, its glass smeared with soot from scorched oxygen vents. He stood in the center of a holographic war table, data swirling around him in alien symbols. His advisors flanked him, silent, knowing better than to speak unless summoned. Trexer's fists were clenched behind his back. "They do not use shielding," he growled. "Their weapons fire chunks of metal. There are no quantum signatures, no pulse emissions, no gravity warp." "Primitive, sir," said his second-in-command. "Primitive," Trexer repeated, "yet effective." He turned, and his gaze locked onto the tactical interface. A bright crescent of human-controlled ground blinked steadily within their perimeter. It should have collapsed in minutes. Instead, it held strong, like a splinter buried beneath the skin of a superpower. "Deploy the first vortex element," he commanded. "We'll drown them in entropy. Bring the particle shredders. I want them gone by sundown." Back in a human camp, the tanks had repositioned into staggered cover lines. Infantry took high ground, laying down sensor nets made of copper wire and frost-flecked drone discs. Elias stood before his team, a holographic topography displayed over the hood of an old command vehicle. "This isn't a siege," he said, voice low and firm. "It's bait. They'll come fast, thinking we're out of position. So we give them that impression. We draw them in close." Barnes scratched the side of his helmet. "Close with what?" "They're bringing particle shredders. That crap turns everything into red mist." "Exactly," Elias nodded. "But they need time to set up. They're not mobile. We hit them before they're ready." Reyes narrowed his eyes. "You want us to go on the offensive?" Elias met his stare. "I want to remind them that humans don't dig in. We strike back." The plan was formed quickly. Anika's scouts would harass the Veruans' forward setup teams, forcing them to spread thin. Meanwhile, the Abrams would rotate through decoy positions, firing, repositioning, disappearing. Make it look chaotic. Make it look desperate. It began at dusk. The Empire's assault shimmered down the valley like liquid obsidian. The first vortex element arrived not with thunder, but silence. Long, insectal walkers moved in elegant unison, limbs emitting no sound as they strode over snowbanks. Between them, floating towers hovered, each containing a humming shard of unstable energy. The particle shredders. But something was wrong. Their forward teams weren't returning. Drones vanished without a trace. Readings flickered and died. Then the first shell screamed through the air. A direct hit slammed into a tower stabilizer, erupting in a crimson sphere that collapsed into itself, taking 3 walkers with it. The snow below warped as the gravity field failed, pulling machines and pieces of trees into a sudden miniature vortex before imploding. The Veruans shrieked in confusion. Their formations tangled. More shells came, faster, accurate with no warning. No plasma trails to trace. Just fire and ruin. Elias's voice rang through human comms. Shift positions. Keep the angles rotating. His tank moved like a beast through the forest, ice cracking beneath its treads. From the brush, Reyes fired another sabot shell. It ripped through the second tower's anchor and sent it crashing down the ravine. Trexer watched the battlefield unravel from his command canopy. His elite force was disintegrating. The shredders were gone, neutralized before they could fire a single pulse. They knew, he said, almost in disbelief. They knew where we'd be. One of his advisors spoke cautiously. The human captain, he is not relying on technology. He is predicting behavior. It is intuition. Impossible, Trexer hissed. No commander thinks faster than an imperial battle algorithm. And yet, the results were undeniable. As the battle intensified, Elias remained focused. His team had taken losses. 1 Abrams disabled by a freak plasma strike, 3 infantry down, but their line held. They weren't fighting with superiority. They were fighting with tenacity, timing, and a brutal understanding of terrain and cover. Anika's squad circled behind the enemy's right flank, cutting down command drones and forcing their coordination to collapse. She moved like a shadow, carving a path through frost and fire. Trexer, watching the final vortex tower fall in flames, felt something he hadn't in decades. Uncertainty. They are humans, he whispered. How are they doing this? No one answered. On the ground, Elias stood atop Mauler again, eyes fixed on the horizon where the last of the vortex walkers limped away, dragging one shattered leg. Behind him, the valley smoldered, trees bent but unbroken. Soldiers walked among wreckage, tired but undefeated. Barnes climbed up beside him, helmet off, hair damp with sweat. Think they'll be back? Oh yeah, Elias said, not looking away. But next time, they'll be afraid. The sky darkened as night settled in. Snowflakes began to fall once more, soft and steady. The storm hadn't passed. It had only begun. The wind howled over the valley, curling through jagged trees like a restless spirit. What remained of the Veruin's vortex element had vanished into the mountains, leaving only burning hulls and irradiated scars in the snow. Human patrols moved through the debris slowly, weapons raised, nerves tight. Even in retreat, the enemy left traps, silent drones buried in snowbanks, pressure mines disguised as frost-glazed stones. Every step forward required precision. Captain Elias Grant stood in the shadow of a broken Veruin tower, one hand resting on its metallic spine. The alien structure pulsed faintly, reacting to the atmosphere as if wounded. He watched the glow dim with each breath, then turned away, expression unreadable. He found Sergeant Havel crouched beside the body of a fallen scout, her knife sheathed but her sidearm drawn. The soldier had taken a plasma shard to the neck. No pain, no time to scream. His fingers were still curled around a flare. Anika gently unclasped them. They're adapting, she muttered. Their shots are tighter. Tracking systems aren't relying on light signatures anymore. They're learning us, Elias said. They've already learned too much. He looked down at the scout, then toward the forest beyond. The enemy had fallen back for now, but not in defeat. The silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. The command post had been re-established further up the ridge, tucked between natural rock walls and shielded by heavy camouflage netting. Soldiers rotated in and out, faces pale with exhaustion, but eyes sharp. The Abrams tanks were parked in staggered formation, crews sleeping in shifts or rewiring damage from the last engagement. A thin plume of smoke rose from a fireless kitchen, ration steam and recycled water. Every scent lingered with sweat and frost. Inside the briefing tent, Reyes paced. Maps littered the display table, showing every path, ridge, and collapsed road from the valley floor to the plateau above. They're not coming from the west. That slope's too narrow, and we've mined it 6 times. East is too exposed, Barnes added. Even they won't risk that. Anika stepped forward, dragging her knife along a trail on the topographic display. They'll take the spine of the canyon. It's suicide for infantry, but they don't use infantry like we do. Their crawlers can scale vertical inclines. Elias nodded slowly. They'll want the high ground. If they seize the plateau, they can deploy full orbital comms and bring down fire support. We lose that ridge, we're done. What do we do? Barnes asked. We take the fight up, Elias replied. Before they get there. Reyes blinked. You want to climb the canyon? I want to meet them where they think we can't go. It wasn't a decision made lightly. Climbing through the canyon's jagged path meant abandoning armored cover, splitting the units into strike teams, and facing the Veroan without the Abrams. But time wasn't on their side. Intelligence intercepts showed movement. Massive. Too coordinated to be a feint. The enemy wasn't retreating anymore. They were concentrating. That night, under a moonless sky, the teams moved out. 3 squads ascended into the canyon under full blackout. Boots scraped ice-covered stone. Hands gripped exposed roots and frozen cables from a pre-war power station long since gutted. No one spoke. Anika led the point squad, her body flowing from shadow to shadow like smoke. She barely made a sound, guiding soldiers through vertical climbs and narrow ledges with silent hand signals and cold, calculating precision. Elias moved with the 2nd unit, burdened by the weight of leadership more than the gear on his back. Every man and woman behind him believed in the plan because he'd made it. That was the weight of command. Confidence didn't mean certainty. It meant commitment. They reached the upper ridge before dawn. The plateau spread before them like a broken crown, flat, scarred, and treacherous. Giant metal fragments from past wars jutted out of the snow, half buried in ice. Smoke curled from cracks in the ground, where geothermal vents bled warmth into the air. And across the field, crawling like a tide of obsidian insects, came the Veroan. Thousands. Sleek, glimmering machines slithered over stone like water. Their shapes weren't uniform. Some moved on limbs, others hovered, others oozed like living metal. But all of them shared a terrible unity of purpose. A hive without hesitation. Elias crouched behind a shattered solar pylon. He watched them deploy, silent, meticulous, terrifying. He lifted his comm. Reyes, target the relay drones. They're still blind without them. From the other end of the ridge, Reyes's team opened fire. The silence of the plateau shattered as high-velocity rounds screamed through the morning haze. Relay drones exploded in sharp flashes, raining glass and plasma fragments. Chaos rippled through the Veroan front line. But the enemy adapted fast. Their crawlers surged forward, spider-like limbs clinging to the cliff walls, trying to flank. Anika and her team intercepted them mid-motion, laying down suppressive fire and planting directional charges. Explosions lit the ridge edge in a stuttering sequence. Screams echoed, inhuman, modulated, synthetic. Elias's team moved forward, deeper into the plateau, toward a central tower rising like a dagger from the stone. If they could destroy it, they could collapse the Veroan's battlefield command. They reached the base of the tower just as enemy skirmishers descended from above. Sleek humanoid forms, coated in reflective armor, dropped into their midst like falling stars. The clash was brutal. Hand-to-hand, close-range gunfire, knives, fists, desperation. Elias fought like a man possessed. One of the skirmishers lunged at him with a spear of sharpened light. He ducked under it, drove a knife into the creature's thigh joint, then pivoted and fired into its chest point blank. The armor cracked like porcelain. Another came from behind. Barnes intercepted it, firing a shotgun burst that threw the enemy back over the ridge. Elias didn't pause. Plant the charges. Reyes scrambled to the tower base and set the demolition timers. Sparks danced as the magnets locked into place. The Veroan were closing fast, too fast. Anika's voice came through the comm. We can't hold the ridge. Too many crawlers. Fall back to blast radius, Elias ordered. Now! They pulled back together, covering each other, dragging the wounded. The timer ticked down in Elias's mind as clearly as if it were painted across the sky. 15 seconds. He turned back one last time. The tower stood proud, untouched by weather, untouched by time. He hated how clean it looked, how alien. He hated what it meant. 5 seconds. They dove behind a frozen ridge as the charges detonated. The explosion wasn't a roar. It was a scream. The tower didn't simply collapse. It unraveled. Layers of synthetic fiber and liquid crystal came apart in a soundless pulse that shattered nearby machines. A dome of pressure flattened everything within 100 meters. Elias covered his ears, but the sound still penetrated, deep, wrong, like being stared at by something with no eyes. When it was over, the tower was gone. The plateau was silent again. Anika crawled to Elias's side, face streaked with soot. We did it. For now, he said. She looked back toward the smoldering remains. They'll know we're not animals anymore. They'll know we're hunters, Elias replied. Above them, the sky turned red as the first rays of sunlight cut through the smoke. Far off in orbit, aboard a vast Veroan dreadnought, High Marshal Trexer stood before a display showing the battle's aftermath. Data flickered, enemy movements, casualty spikes, tower collapse. He leaned forward, claws tapping the glass. Dispatch the Warlord cast, he said. No more games. And far below, Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Something darker was coming. The clouds boiled overhead, heavy with snow and ash, casting a bruised light over the battlefield below. Smoke drifted in thick curtains from burning wreckage, and the air carried the scent of scorched ozone, melted alloy, and blood. The plateau, once a high ground advantage, had become a graveyard of both alien machinery and human effort. The Veroan had responded to the tower's destruction not with retreat, but fury. Elias crouched in a trench carved hastily into the frozen ground, blood seeping through the fabric of his right sleeve. Around him, soldiers huddled against the cold and fear, steam rising from their breath in shallow bursts. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but not out of fight. The Warlord cast had arrived. They were different, larger, more brutal in design, less machine, more beast. No sleek elegance like the drones or skirmishers. These walked with thunderous weight, their armor blackened and jagged, their weapons fused into their limbs. Where earlier Veroan units had moved with cold precision, these stalked forward with hatred in every motion. This wasn't war to them. It was vengeance. Their breaking formation, Anika reported, crawling beside Elias with a long barrel of her rifle slung over her back. Her face was smeared with grime, but her eyes remained sharp. They're confident, Elias said. They want us to see them coming. We've got less than a dozen rockets, half power on the railguns, and the Abrams are stuck at the base of the slope. That's not enough. It'll have to be. A flare arced overhead, blue. The signal meant fallback, not retreat. Reposition. Reyes's voice crackled over comms, barely cutting through the interference. They're pressing hard through Sector 4. Can't hold much longer. What's the call? Elias wiped his mouth with the back of his glove, smearing more blood across his chin. He looked east, down the ridge, where thick smoke clung to the trees. If they could draw the warlords in far enough, force them into range. "We open the line," he said. "Let them chase us." Anika blinked. Into the kill box? Into the fire? Reyes didn't argue. No one did. Orders carried weight because trust had already been earned in blood. The squads moved quickly. They left false trails, remote triggered mines, and snare charges in their wake. Human ingenuity, simple, brutal, effective. It wouldn't stop the warlords, but it would make them bleed. Elias led the fallback through the tree line, ducking behind snow-choked logs, signaling with clenched fists and short bursts of static. Behind him, the sound of Veruan pursuit grew louder. Clanking limbs, roaring plasma engines, the guttural hum of power building. One of the beasts let out a howl, synthetic and monstrous, followed by the crack of detonations as the mines slowed their pace. From the base of the slope, Reyes had rallied the remaining Abrams crews. The tanks, scarred but operational, sat in an arc, their barrels elevated and ready. Engineers worked furiously to patch in external targeting feeds. Snow hissed beneath their treads. Inside the lead Abrams, Corporal Dana Holloway sat at the gunner's console, fingers flexing. She stared into the thermal imaging feed, watching the distant heat blooms grow. Her voice was steady. Targets acquiring, confirming mass, direction, speed. They're coming straight at us. Elias's voice came through comms. Hold fire until you see their command units. We take the head off the snake. Copy that. The Veruan emerged from the smoke like titans. Elias saw them from the tree line. 12-foot monstrosities, hunched and plated in segmented armor, their faces hidden behind black lenses. Their weapons glowed with lethal energy, built into their arms like industrial murder tools. They moved in formation, flanked by scout units, and shielded by kinetic barriers that shimmered faintly. One of them raised an arm, fired. A tree behind Elias exploded into splinters. Shards of bark sliced through his jacket. He didn't flinch. Instead, he broke cover and ran across the open snow, waving his arm. The others followed. They had to draw them in. The Veruan advanced. Without hesitation, the humans fell back into the designated kill zone, an open basin rimmed by ice-covered boulders and sloped terrain. There was no natural protection, only bait. Elias dropped to a knee at the basin's edge, raised his hand, and screamed into the calm. Now! The Abrams opened fire. A wall of sound erupted, deafening, physical, apocalyptic. The main cannons belched shells that screamed through the air and slammed into the Veruan line. One warlord vanished in a cloud of metal and vapor. Another staggered, its armor torn open, black fluid spraying from its chest. The tanks kept firing. Holloway's gun tracked targets like a conductor directing a symphony of death. Every round was deliberate. Every hit punishment. The warlords tried to raise shields, but kinetic impact overwhelmed them. They fell back, but it was too late. Reyes detonated the charges lining the ridge. The slope collapsed in a thunderous roar, burying two warlords in stone and ice. Those that remained turned to regroup, but found themselves surrounded. Elias and his teams re-emerged from the tree line, weapons hot. They didn't hesitate. Gunfire lit the basin like a lightning storm. Grenades fell in arcs. One of the warlords turned to face Elias, its chest burning, arm raised to fire. Elias dove sideways, rolled through the snow, and fired a burst into the joint at the creature's neck. Its head snapped back. It didn't fall. It charged. Anika tackled Elias out of the way a split second before the Veruan crashed down where he'd stood. She rose, pulled her knife, and drove it into the alien's eye socket. Sparks burst. The creature spasmed and went still. More kept coming. Holloway screamed through the calm. Shells almost gone. Make the last ones count, Elias barked. The remaining tanks fired point blank. The warlords tried to close the distance, but speed wasn't enough. One by one, they were torn apart. And then silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was ragged, breathless. The kind of silence that came after total violence, where the only sound was snow melting on hot metal. Elias sat in the blood-stained snow, chest heaving. His weapon was empty. His hand shook. Anika stood nearby, leaning on a rifle like a crutch. Smoke rose from craters where alien bodies twitched. Reyes limped over, blood down one leg. That all of them? Elias didn't answer right away. He stared at the blackened remains of the warlords, at the wreckage of human resolve and alien arrogance. Then he looked toward the sky. No, he said, but they'll remember this. Far above, aboard the Veruan dreadnought, High Marshal Trexer watched in silence. His command deck flickered with data feeds. Losses, telemetry, ruined units. Around him, advisors shifted uncomfortably. One approached. They used primitive weapons. Trexer's gaze didn't leave the screen. Their weapons are not primitive. They are obsolete by galactic standards. Crude, inefficient. Trexer turned, his voice low. And yet we bleed. He walked to the viewport, where Earth hung below, scarred, defiant, unconquered. In the invasion, he said, this war will not be won by force. And the humans? Trexer's voice darkened. They are not animals. They are monsters. And monsters do not fear death. They teach it. Back on the plateau, Elias looked out over the field of victory. Get the wounded inside, he said. Bury our dead. Anika nodded. And the enemy? He holstered his pistol. Let their dead rot in the snow. The galaxy needs the reminder.